Yeah, and you've said it a couple times now in this conversation that HR managers are it's passive aggressive. They're not being upfront, they're not being honest, and at the end of the day, the person that's going to hurt is that person who's over 50 or even somebody who's under 50. They're the ones who are going to suffer. That HR manager is going to keep their job. Have you ever been at work and you sit there and you're at your desk or you're in your cubicle or you're in your office and you're just wondering, am I about to be fired? And I think sometimes when we have that in our mind, we already are thinking, am I about to be fired? I think we already know that answer. Well, today I'm with Joric McLean. As you may know, if you follow our channel, Joric McLean is a HR professional. He's a pro, he's an expert. Joric was the HR manager for the Phoenix Suns, the NBA basketball team. Joric also has over 20 years experience as an HR manager. So when it comes to determining the signs, how do you know if you're going to be fired? Well, there's nobody better to ask than Joric McLean. And today what we're going to do is ask Joric to tell us some of the signs. And I think there's about 7 that we're about to talk about. 7 signs you are about to be fired. Welcome to Over 50 TV, Joric.
Hey, thanks again, Lou, for having me here, and enjoy every minute of it.
I'm glad you do, because I also enjoy talking to you. I think our viewers do as well. And this is really kind of, I would almost want to say, a hot topic for people who are over 50. When you're a little bit older and you're at your job, we know statistics all say that 56% of people over the age of 50 more than likely are going to be pushed out of their job before they're ready to retire. And when you got statistics that are that high or that much against you, yeah, you're always looking or thinking, am I about to be fired? So, Joric, let's talk about it. Give us some of the signs that a person will know. So a person does know that they're about to be terminated, kicked out of their job.
So the first one should be, I'll say, straightforward, meaning you alluded to it. It's almost like you're thinking about you're going to get fired.
Yeah.
And part of it may be because of, and I think this is something that most people get a feeling of, underperforming. And it's, you're underperforming. It's not a matter of anyone's told you yet, but you didn't hit your sales goal for the year, or you were supposed to get a bonus of something. So I'll go from that end. Or you had a project due and it didn't get done on time. So then there's been some issues. Or you're reading the newspaper and you hear about what's going on with contracts and unions, and you have some worry about some things about, gosh, I wonder if I'm still going to have my cubicle, my office space, my manufacturing slot. You never know. Yeah. Those are all things. But the first one is straightforward. You already know, or you already think it's coming, because you didn't hit the mark. You're underperforming in some way, or maybe you've been testy with employees and you've been giving one-word answers in meetings, and you just, the first and probably the biggest one I can display is that you already have it in your head that something's happening without anyone really telling you yet. That's to me a big one.
Yeah, underperforming. We know. So what's another one that you know from your experience?
Yeah, another straightforward one. The boss isn't happy, and there's nothing you can do to make the boss happy. You could even have, I'll go with this. You brought your project in ahead of time and under budget, still not good enough. You hit your sales mark and then some, still not good enough. There's still, and where I'm going that specifically with someone that's over 50 is, for years you did that and you were getting bonuses and raises and praises and plaques and awards, and now you're getting the boss upset at you for going above and beyond. That's something that should tell you, okay, something isn't right here, because I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing here, and It's worked for years. Now all of a sudden what used to work isn't, and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So it's not a matter of underperforming, but the boss is starting to get on me. And so that has to go through my head of, okay, why is the boss, did we have a falling out, or is the boss thinking about headcount and thinking about, okay, I'm now 55, and they're thinking about, okay, got to hire a 25-year-old to replace me. Falling out with bosses and the bosses being upset with you when they haven't been historically, that's a major sign for sure.
Yeah. And I've seen that too. Sometimes it's a matter of the bosses move, but more often than not, if you can't do anything to make that boss happy, that manager, then you know that you got a good shot of being thrown out that door. What's
Yeah.
another one? Give us another one.
So another one might not be as clear to people, but your work starts getting parted out to colleagues
Ah,
and friends. And so whether you're in a manufacturing job and, hey, we don't need you over here, we'll put you over, take you off this press and put you over into this role, your role changes, or the amount of things you do in your job starts kind of getting whittled away and gets taken up by other people. That to me is not necessarily, over time, that's a clear sign. But when it starts happening, you don't realize, oh, hey, I have more time on my hands because Joe just took this role away from me, or this project. But you're not realizing that there's a method behind the madness, because the organization or your boss is thinking of who's going to be replacing you down the road, unfortunately. So when you have 100 things to do during your shift or during your day, and now all of a sudden you have 90 and 80 and 70, that's a sign again that something's happening, and it means that your future is probably going to be short.
yeah, and disappointing, short and
Yes.
disappointing. Give us another one if you don't mind.
Another one, so along those lines, with your job being shrunk to some degree, if you're usually participate in certain meetings, or whether it be all employee department meetings, Zoom calls, which have been for the last couple of years, have been kind of many meetings. If you're no longer being invited to them, and it's not because somebody forgot to put you on the distribution list, it's because they purposefully, so all of a sudden, and that happened to me in one role where, after a couple of those, and I asked, okay, did you just forget to put me on? No, that was by intention. After the second time it happened, I went up to my
Wow.
boss and I said, okay, so is this the writing on the wall that you haven't told me yet that I'm supposed to read into? And it was a long conversation, but it was the start of, okay, I need to leave, because this was they were doing it in a very passive aggressive way. And then also in meetings too, if you are someone that generally likes to participate or gets called on often in meetings to give your take, or, Lou, what's your opinion on this? And the manager or people stop calling on you for stuff, that's also a very subtle way that also happened in the same situation, where you used to be, Joric, what's your opinion? And then no one's looking. So you almost have to volunteer your opinion. It's kind of a sneaky way, but it's also a way that you can tell that you're starting to get marginalized, which means that your days are being counted.
Yeah, George, I hadn't thought about that, but boy, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because if you're in a meeting and you normally do get called on and you're being ignored, you just said marginalized. Yeah, man, I could totally see where that is just writing on the wall.
Another one that's pretty straightforward, a poor review. And especially when you've had a career, when you've had, I'll say, good to great reviews. Let's say if it's a 4.0 is an A, like an old grade school scale, and you start getting, let's say, C's on certain things that you're doing when you used to be doing A's, and realistically you go, gosh, I thought I was doing a great job. I haven't had any employee issues or client or vendor issues. I thought I've done what I've been asked to do. But when you start seeing reviews start turning south, or people being more hypercritical of, sort of really splitting hairs on things, especially when you get older, you got to go, okay, what's going on here? Is this because oftentimes, and I will say this from HR, and most people in your audience will realize this, especially if they've been displaced. HR is where the documentation starts, and usually for legal purposes, poor reviews are one of the first ways that documentation starts to get someone out the door. And a poor review is one of the easiest ways, to be honest with you, to show on paper, especially if you sign off on that poor review of what's going on. So that's something that's more of a clear sign. I don't think people have to read in too much of that. But if you get a poor review, especially if you've had your career of good ones, that's a sign that something's up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You just said something about documentation. When you start getting a lot of documentation, do you see that too as a sign?
Yes. So that is something that when you've had a career too. So I'm thinking of older employees over 50. When you've generally had the only documentation that's in your file is commendations, rewards, and bonus letters, is now turning into write-ups or issues with other employees, or issues especially with, let's say, your boss, or how they feel you're handling your whatever your work is. That's something that will tell you, okay, I've got to start thinking about something else, because if for this long period of time I've been able to satisfy my boss and make everybody happy, or at least content with my role and me being
Mhm.
here, and I'm no longer able to do that, you can do anything to keep your job. You may just need to go find something else, because your boss and other people may have already made up their minds that within a
Yeah.
year and enough documentation, Jork's going to be gone. So we're already thinking past him when the documentation starts.
Yeah. And when they're doing the documentation, they're really, one of the things that I know just from what I've seen is the documentation's protecting them in case you were to file some legal, if you're the employee, you want to file some legal action.
Absolutely. And that's something that comes up to kind of the last point, if you will. And it
Yeah.
goes along with documentation too, is specifically PIPs, or performance improvement plans. Sometimes they're
Mhm.
called final warnings, last chance agreements. There's usually they are written, and I'll say this because I've written them, and they're written in a way that is not beneficial to the employee. They're written in a
Yeah.
way that's beneficial to the employer, to where you literally have to be on your straight and narrow, and if you just move a centimeter to the left or right of that document, you're gone. And that's something that, when you get to that stage, whatever that your company calls that performance improvement plan, if you are in a room and you're shown that document, whatever they want to call it, that is basically their way of saying, we don't want you here anymore. So start looking for a job right now. And that document usually has 30 to 60 days to improve. I would say it's rare, it's not unheard of, but of the PIPs, or last chance agreements I've been a part of,
Mhm.
out of, let's say, if you were to say 100, 95 of them, the person was no longer there. 5 of them made it, just
Yeah.
because of how they were written
Wow.
and whatnot. And it's something that it's unfortunate, but it is something that people need to realize.
Yeah. And you've said it a couple times now in this conversation that HR managers are, it's passive aggressive, they're not being upfront, they're not being honest. And at the end of the day, the person that's going to hurt is that person who's over 50, or even somebody who's under 50. They're the ones who are going to suffer. That HR manager is going to keep their job. Well, George, I really want to thank you once again. Once again, I want to really thank you for being here today. I'm so happy that we can tap into your experience and really find out what these people, what the HR managers are thinking, or so at least an employee knows what's going on with their career.
Yeah, I mean, this is a sobering one. This is not a fun topic, but I
No,
hope people get something from it and they take something. So if they're in that position, the light bulb goes off and goes, "Uh-oh, this is unfortunate, but this is the sign that my days are counted," unfortunately.
absolutely. Well, George, thanks again, and I will talk with you soon.
Hey, thank you so much.